Vivian Carter Blackwood, had spent 18 years wondering one question. When had her husband stopped loving her? She searched for the answer every sleepless night, replaying countless memories in her mind. Had it been after Sophie Monroe returned? Was it when Lucas called Ethan Dad for the first time? Or had Ethan never truly loved her at all? Now, lying in a cold hospital bed with machines beeping weakly beside her, Vivian finally realized the truth. It hadn't happened overnight. It had happened one choice at a time. One lie. One betrayal. One ignored tear after another. Outside her hospital room, laughter echoed through the hallway. Vivian turned her head toward the half-open door. There they were. Ethan Blackwood, Sophie Monroe, Lucas Monroe. The perfect family. Her husband stood proudly with his arm around Sophie while Lucas, now 18 years old and dressed in an expensive tailored suit, laughed as reporters snapped photos. The Blackwood heir. The future CEO. The pride of the Blackwood family. Vivian's lips curled into a bitter smile. No one remembered that she was still Ethan's legal wife. No one remembered that she had spent years sacrificing everything to keep the Blackwood family together. Not even Ethan. Especially not Ethan. A nurse quietly adjusted Vivian's blanket. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Blackwood." Vivian smiled gently. "There is nothing to be sorry for." Her body had already begun to fail after the accident 6 months earlier. The doctors called it multiple organ failure caused by severe internal injuries. Vivian simply called it freedom. Because there was nothing left to lose. The nurse hesitated before speaking again. "Would you like me to call your husband?" Vivian looked toward the window, where rain streaked down the glass. "My husband." She almost laughed. "He stopped being my husband years ago. 18 years earlier. The Blackwood mansion had once been filled with warmth. Vivian had married Ethan Blackwood at 24. Back then, Ethan wasn't the cold billionaire everyone feared. He was kind, gentle, protective. He used to bring her flowers every Friday after work. He insisted on making breakfast every Sunday, even though he could barely fry an egg without burning it. When Vivian caught a cold, Ethan canceled international meetings just to stay home beside her. Those memories felt like they belonged to another lifetime. Because they did. 3 years into their marriage, everything changed. It happened on a rainy afternoon. Vivian still remembered every detail. She had been arranging fresh lilies in the living room when the front door opened. Ethan walked in. Behind him stood a beautiful woman holding the hand of a little boy. The woman's long chestnut hair clung to her shoulders from the rain. Tears streamed down her face. "Vivian." Ethan's voice sounded strangely nervous. "This is Sophie." Vivian's smile disappeared. She recognized the name instantly. Sophie Monroe. Ethan's first love. The woman everyone said he would have married if she hadn't suddenly disappeared years ago. Sophie lowered her head. "I'm sorry for coming here." The little boy hid behind her legs. He couldn't have been older than 3. Vivian forced herself to remain calm. "What happened?" Sophie burst into tears. I had nowhere else to go." Ethan stepped forward. "Vivian." His voice trembled. "The boy." He looked toward the child with complicated emotions. "Is mine." The vase slipped from Vivian's hands. It shattered across the marble floor. Silence filled the mansion. She stared at Ethan. "What did you just say?" Sophie cried harder. "We were together before you met. I found out I was pregnant after I left. I didn't tell him because I didn't want to ruin his future. I raised Lucas alone." She looked at Ethan with trembling eyes. "But now, I'm sick. I don't know how much longer I have. I only wanted Lucas to know his father." Vivian couldn't breathe. She looked at the little boy, then at Ethan, then back at Sophie. Every instinct told her something was wrong. But before she could ask another question, Lucas reached toward Ethan. "Daddy." One word. That single innocent word shattered everything. Ethan knelt immediately. He hugged the boy tightly. Tears filled his eyes. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Vivian had never seen Ethan cry. Not when his company nearly went bankrupt. Not when his grandfather died. Yet here he was, crying for another woman's child. She quietly walked upstairs. No one followed her. Not even Ethan. That night, Vivian sat alone in their bedroom. The rain tapped softly against the windows. Hours passed. Finally, Ethan entered. His tie was loose. His eyes were red. Vivian spoke first. "Did you know?" "No." "You never suspected?" "No." "You never questioned why she disappeared?" "I searched for her." Vivian lowered her eyes. "So, she came back. And you believed everything she said?" Ethan hesitated. "I had a DNA test done." Vivian looked up sharply. "What?" He placed an envelope on the table. "The results came this afternoon." Vivian stared at the document. Probability of paternity: 99.99%. Her heart sank. "So, it's true." Ethan closed his eyes. "He's my son." Vivian wanted to scream, to throw the papers into the fireplace, to ask why fate had been so cruel. Instead, she quietly asked, "What happens now?" Ethan looked away. "I can't abandon him." Vivian nodded slowly. "I understand." "And Sophie?" Ethan paused. "She has nowhere to live." Vivian already knew what he was going to say. "You want them to stay here?" "It's temporary." Temporary. That single word became 18 years. The next morning, servants carried suitcases into the guest wing. Sophie apologized repeatedly. "I'll leave as soon as I recover." Vivian smiled politely. "There is no rush." Inside, her heart broke with every passing minute. Lucas wandered through the mansion with wide eyes. "Daddy." He ran toward Ethan. Ethan laughed. He picked the little boy up effortlessly. "Want to see your room?" Lucas nodded excitedly. Vivian watched from the staircase. Ethan had once dreamed of decorating a nursery with her. He had spent months discussing baby names. Now, he carried another woman's child through the halls of their home, as if they had always belonged there. Days turned into weeks. Weeks became months. Lucas quickly adapted to life in the mansion. He followed Ethan everywhere. To breakfast. To business meetings. To charity events. Whenever Ethan came home, Lucas ran into his arms. "Daddy." Ethan always smiled. Always. Vivian noticed something else. He smiled less and less at her. One evening, Vivian prepared Ethan's favorite dinner. Beef Wellington. Creamed potatoes. Red wine. Everything exactly the way he liked. She waited. 8 o'clock. 9. 10. Finally, the front door opened. Ethan walked in carrying Lucas asleep on his shoulder. Sophie's voice floated behind him. "I'm sorry. He refused to sleep until he saw you." Ethan chuckled. "It's okay." Vivian stepped forward. "Dinner's ready." Ethan barely glanced toward the table. "I'm not hungry." Lucas stirred in his sleep. Ethan smiled gently. "I'll put him to bed." He walked upstairs. Sophie followed. Vivian stood alone in the dining room. The candles burned quietly. The food grew cold. She looked at the untouched dinner she had spent hours preparing. Then she quietly sat down and ate alone. Late that night, Vivian stood outside the nursery Ethan had prepared for Lucas. The door was slightly open. Inside, Ethan sat beside the sleeping boy, reading a bedtime story. His voice was warm, patient, full of affection. Vivian remembered another night years ago, when Ethan had whispered, "I can't wait until we have children. I'll read bedtime stories every night." Tears blurred her vision. He had kept his promise. Just not to her. She quietly turned away before anyone noticed she had been standing there. Downstairs, Sophie waited in the living room. She smiled sweetly. Vivian. Vivian stopped. I really am grateful. For what? For letting us stay. Vivian looked into Sophie's eyes. There was something hidden there. Something that made her uneasy. Then Sophie smiled again. So are you planning to have children? Vivian blinked. What? It'll be difficult. Children need their father's attention. And Ethan already has so many responsibilities. She laughed softly. I hope you won't feel lonely. Vivian said nothing. But for the first time, she realized something terrifying. Sophie wasn't here because she had nowhere to go. She was here to stay. The days that followed slowly transformed Blackwood Mansion into a place Vivian barely recognized. It happened so gradually that no one else seemed to notice. Lucas's toys appeared in the living room. His tiny shoes lined the front entrance. His drawings covered the refrigerator. Family photographs began replacing the elegant paintings that once decorated the walls. In every picture, Ethan was smiling. Sometimes he was carrying Lucas on his shoulders. Sometimes Sophie stood beside them. To anyone walking through the mansion for the first time, they looked like a happy little family. Vivian wasn't in a single photograph. One morning, Vivian walked downstairs wearing a pale blue dress Ethan had once said was his favorite. She had spent nearly an hour preparing breakfast herself. French toast, fresh fruit, coffee exactly the way Ethan liked it. As she placed the last plate on the table, Lucas came running into the dining room. Daddy. Ethan looked up from his newspaper and smiled instantly. Good morning, champ. Lucas climbed into Ethan's lap without asking. I want pancakes. Ethan chuckled. You heard the boss. He looked at the chef. Make Lucas some pancakes. The chef hesitated. But Mrs. Blackwood already prepared breakfast. Ethan didn't even glance at Vivian. Lucas doesn't like French toast. The chef quickly hurried back into the kitchen. Vivian stood frozen. She had woken up at 5 in the morning to prepare Ethan's favorite breakfast. He hadn't even noticed. Sophie walked in a moment later, pretending to look embarrassed. Oh, Lucas is so picky. She smiled apologetically. I'm sorry for troubling everyone. It's no trouble, Ethan replied. We'll cook whatever he wants. Vivian lowered her eyes. No one asked what she wanted. Weeks later, Vivian received wonderful news. She was pregnant. The tiny heartbeat echoed through the doctor's office, filling her heart with hope. She couldn't stop smiling during the drive home. Maybe, just maybe, this baby would remind Ethan of the family they had once dreamed of. She waited until dinner to tell him. Ethan. He looked up briefly from his phone. What is it? Vivian handed him the ultrasound photo with trembling hands. For a moment, his eyes softened. We're going to have a baby. Silence filled the room. Vivian waited for him to smile, to hug her, to tell her how happy he was. Instead, Lucas suddenly cried from upstairs. Daddy. Without another word, Ethan stood up. I'll be back. He rushed upstairs. Vivian remained seated at the dining table. The ultrasound rested between untouched plates. Nearly an hour passed. When Ethan finally returned, Lucas had fallen asleep in his arms. I'm sorry, he said quietly. He had a nightmare. Vivian nodded. It's okay. But inside, she wondered why another woman's child always came first. The months passed. Vivian's pregnancy became more difficult. Morning sickness left her exhausted. Her ankles swelled. Some nights she couldn't even walk without help. Yet Ethan was rarely home. Every weekend, he took Lucas to amusement parks, zoos, museums, and baseball games. The newspapers loved publishing photographs of the devoted billionaire father. CEO Ethan Blackwood enjoys family day with his son. Blackwood heir captures hearts at charity gala. Vivian folded the newspaper silently. No one knew Ethan also had a pregnant wife waiting at home. One rainy evening, Vivian slipped while walking down the marble staircase. Pain shot through her stomach. She grabbed the railing just before falling. A maid rushed toward her. "Mrs. Blackwood." Vivian's face had turned pale. "My baby." The maid immediately called Ethan. He answered after several rings. "Sir, Mrs. Blackwood nearly fell. We think she needs to go to the hospital." There was a brief pause. Then Ethan asked, "Is she bleeding?" "No. I'll finish my meeting first." The maid glanced at Vivian in disbelief. "But sir, I'm with Lucas. He has his school performance today. I'll come afterward." The line went dead. Vivian slowly closed her eyes. She had heard every word. The maid looked horrified. "I'll call an ambulance." Vivian forced a smile. "No, I'll go myself." The baby survived, but the doctor gave her a strict warning. "You need complete rest. No stress. Your pregnancy is becoming high risk." Vivian nodded obediently. When she returned home that evening, Ethan was already there. Lucas proudly showed him a small gold trophy. "I won first place." Ethan laughed with pride. "That's my boy." Then he noticed Vivian standing near the doorway. "How's the baby?" "We're fine." "Good." He smiled and returned his attention to Lucas. Vivian stood there for another few seconds, then quietly walked upstairs. As the months passed, Sophie slowly began taking over the mansion. At first, she made small suggestions. The curtains would look prettier in white. The living room feels too formal. The guest rooms need renovation. Ethan agreed with everything. Within weeks, the elegant home Vivian had designed after their wedding looked completely different. Even their bedroom wasn't spared. One afternoon, Vivian returned from a doctor's appointment and found workers carrying furniture out. "What are you doing?" The foreman bowed politely. "Mr. Blackwood ordered a nursery." Vivian smiled. "For our baby?" The workers exchanged awkward glances. "No, ma'am. It's for young Master Lucas." Vivian stared at the empty room. It was the room Ethan had promised would one day belong to their child. Now, it belonged to Lucas. Late that night, Vivian couldn't sleep. She walked quietly through the hallway. As she passed the study, she heard voices inside. Sophie. And Ethan. The door wasn't completely closed. "I feel guilty," Sophie whispered. "Vivian deserves better." Ethan sighed heavily. "I know. Then why don't you send us away?" A long silence followed. Finally Ethan spoke. "I can't. Lucas needs stability. He finally has a father." Sophie sniffled softly. "You're too kind." Vivian stood frozen outside the door. Not once had Ethan said, "Vivian needs her husband." She quietly returned to her room. That night, she cried herself to sleep. A month later, Vivian went into labor. The contractions began shortly after midnight. The pain was unbearable. The driver rushed her toward the hospital, while repeatedly trying to contact Ethan. No answer. He called again. And again. Finally, Ethan picked up. "Sir, Mrs. Blackwood is in labor." There was cheering in the background. Ethan sounded distracted. "I know. I'll come soon." The call ended. Vivian bit her lip against another contraction. Something felt wrong. The driver checked social media while waiting at a traffic light. His face turned pale. "Mrs. Blackwood. Mr. Blackwood is..." He stopped speaking. Vivian quietly held out her hand. The driver reluctantly gave her his phone. There, on the screen, was a live video from Lucas's kindergarten. Father-son sports day. Hundreds of parents applauded as Ethan carried Lucas across the finish line. The little boy wrapped his arms around Ethan's neck. "Daddy, we won." The comments flooded the screen. "Best father ever." "Lucas is so lucky." What a beautiful family. Vivian looked at the phone for several seconds, then calmly handed it back. No tears came. Not anymore. 3 hours later, a baby's cry echoed through the delivery room. It's a girl. The nurse smiled warmly. Vivian looked down at the tiny infant wrapped in a pink blanket. The baby's tiny fingers curled around hers. The world suddenly became quiet. Hello, Vivian whispered through tears. My beautiful Lily. The nurse looked toward the hallway. Would you like me to bring your husband in? Vivian glanced at the empty doorway. Outside, no footsteps, no familiar voice, no flowers, no excited father waiting to hold his daughter. Just silence. Vivian kissed Lily's forehead. It's all right. You have Mommy. And I promise, no matter what happens, I will never let anyone make you feel unwanted. She had no idea then that the greatest battle of her life had only just begun. The morning after Lily was born, Vivian woke to the soft sound of her daughter crying. Golden sunlight streamed through the hospital window, casting a warm glow over the tiny bundle sleeping in the bassinet beside her. For the first time in months, Vivian smiled. She carefully lifted Lily into her arms. The baby's tiny fingers wrapped around hers. Good morning, my little miracle. Lily blinked her bright blue eyes before letting out a soft yawn. Vivian couldn't stop looking at her. She had Ethan's eyes, his nose, even the little dimple on her left cheek. If Ethan saw her, surely his heart would melt. Surely he would remember the family they had dreamed of building together. A knock interrupted her thoughts. Vivian looked toward the door with hope. Ethan. But it wasn't him. It was Olivia Bennett, Vivian's best friend. Olivia rushed inside carrying flowers, balloons, and a large teddy bear. There she is. She walked straight to the bed. Oh my goodness. Olivia gasped. She's absolutely beautiful. Vivian laughed softly. I think so too. Olivia carefully held Lily. I can't believe Ethan hasn't arrived yet. Vivian lowered her eyes. He said he was busy. Olivia frowned. Busy? Your wife gives birth to your daughter, and you're busy? Vivian forced a smile. He'll come. Olivia wanted to argue. Instead, she simply hugged her friend. I'll stay until he gets here. Hours passed. Morning became afternoon. Afternoon became evening. The flowers Olivia had brought remained fresh. The chair beside Vivian's bed stayed empty. Finally, just after sunset, the hospital room door opened. Ethan walked in. Vivian's face brightened instantly. You came. Ethan nodded. I'm sorry. There was traffic. Olivia crossed her arms. Traffic. I saw the news. You were at Lucas's piano recital. The room fell silent. Ethan glanced away. He practiced for months. Vivian's heart sank. He hadn't even denied it. Olivia could no longer hide her anger. So your daughter's birth was less important than a kindergarten recital? Ethan's expression hardened. Don't exaggerate. I came, didn't I? Olivia stared at him in disbelief. Vivian quickly shook her head. It's all right. Olivia. Please. Olivia looked at Vivian's tired face. Then silently picked up her purse. I'll visit tomorrow. As she passed Ethan, she whispered. One day, you're going to regret this. Ethan didn't answer. For several seconds, neither husband nor wife spoke. Finally, Vivian smiled gently. Would you like to hold her? Ethan looked toward the sleeping baby. He hesitated, then slowly walked closer. Lily opened her eyes. The moment Ethan leaned over the bassinet, she reached toward him with her tiny hand. Vivian's heart filled with hope. See, she already knows her daddy. For the briefest moment, Ethan smiled. Then his phone rang. He glanced at the screen. Sophie. He answered immediately. What happened? Vivian heard Sophie's panicked voice even from across the room. "Lucas has a fever. He keeps asking for you." Ethan's expression changed instantly. "I'm coming." He hung up. Vivian stared at him. "You just got here." "I know. But Lucas is sick." Vivian looked down at Lily. "Our daughter is only 1 day old. I'll come back tonight." He kissed Vivian's forehead absent-mindedly, then left. The door quietly closed behind him. Lily began crying. Vivian hugged her close. The tears she'd been holding back finally escaped. When Vivian was discharged 3 days later, she returned to Blackwood Mansion with Lily in her arms. She had imagined Ethan decorating the house with balloons. Perhaps a welcome banner. Maybe flowers. Instead, the mansion was covered in blue decorations. "Congratulations, Lucas." Vivian frowned. "What is this?" One of the maids answered carefully. Young Master Lucas won the regional piano competition. The celebration was planned weeks ago. Vivian stood frozen. Even the servants looked uncomfortable. She quietly carried Lily upstairs. No one noticed they had come home. Life became even harder after Lily's birth. Whenever Lily cried during the night, Vivian handled everything alone. Feeding, changing diapers, rocking her to sleep. Meanwhile, Ethan spent most evenings reading bedtime stories to Lucas. One rainy night, Lily developed a high fever. Her tiny body felt dangerously hot. Vivian immediately called Ethan. He answered after several rings. "What is it?" "Lily has a fever. Can you come home?" Silence. Then, "I'm out of town." Vivian frowned. "What?" "I'm taking Lucas camping." "You knew that." Vivian closed her eyes. "No, you never told me." Ethan sighed impatiently. "Call the family doctor. I'm sure she'll be fine." The call ended. Vivian stared at the silent phone, then wrapped Lily in a blanket and drove herself to the hospital in the middle of the storm. She spent the entire night sitting beside Lily's hospital bed. Not once did Ethan call back. A week later, Dr. Daniel Foster visited the mansion for Lily's routine checkup. After examining the baby, he smiled warmly. "She's perfectly healthy." Vivian sighed with relief. As Dr. Foster packed his medical bag, he asked, "Where's Mr. Blackwood?" Vivian smiled awkwardly. "Working." The doctor looked around the room. "I've examined Lily 3 times now. I've never met her father." Vivian had no answer. As Lily grew older, the difference between the 2 children became painfully obvious. Lucas received expensive birthday parties, luxury toys, private tutors, horse riding lessons, a pony, a miniature sports car. Lily received whatever Vivian could quietly buy herself. Every birthday, Vivian organized a small celebration in the garden. Just mother and daughter. Sometimes Olivia joined them. Sometimes Nathan Cole, Ethan's longtime business associate, stopped by with gifts. Nathan adored Lily. He always knelt to her eye level. What should Uncle Nathan bring next year? Lily would giggle. A giant teddy bear. You got it. Nathan never forgot. Unlike Ethan. On Lily's 5th birthday, Vivian made one last attempt. She walked into Ethan's office carrying a handmade invitation. "Lily's birthday party is tomorrow." Ethan looked up briefly. "What time?" 6. "I'll try." Vivian smiled hopefully. "She'll be so happy if you come." The next evening, Lily stood at the front gate wearing a yellow princess dress. Every few minutes, she looked toward the driveway. "Mommy? Is Daddy coming?" Vivian forced herself to smile. He said he'll try. An hour passed. Then another. Finally, a limousine drove through the gates. Lily's face lit up. "Daddy." She ran forward excitedly. The car door opened. Ethan stepped out. But he wasn't alone. Lucas jumped out beside him carrying a huge trophy. "Daddy, I won first place in the National Chess Championship." Ethan laughed proudly. "I knew you would." Lily stood only a few feet away, holding the birthday card she had drawn for him. Ethan walked straight past her. He never noticed. Lily slowly lowered the card. "Mommy." Her tiny voice trembled. "Did Daddy forget?" Vivian knelt beside her daughter. She hugged her tightly. "No, sweetheart. She couldn't finish the sentence. Because, for the first time, she realized there was no excuse left to make. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, Vivian quietly walked into Ethan's study. She placed Lily's unopened birthday card on his desk. The front read, in uneven childish handwriting, "To the best daddy in the world." Inside, a crayon drawing showed 3 smiling figures holding hands. A little girl, a mommy, a daddy. At the bottom, Lily had written, "I love you, Daddy. Please come next year." Vivian looked at the drawing for a long time, then silently turned off the study light. As she closed the door behind her, she made a promise. "If Ethan never learns to love our daughter, then Lily will never spend her life begging for his love." She didn't know it yet, but fate had already begun preparing a truth that would destroy the Blackwood family forever. 10 years passed in the blink of an eye. The little girl who once waited at the front gate with a handmade birthday card had grown into a bright, graceful 15-year-old. Lily Blackwood was everything a parent could hope for. She was kind without being weak, intelligent without being arrogant, beautiful without realizing it. She consistently ranked first in her class, won national piano competitions, volunteered at children's hospitals, and quietly donated her scholarship money to orphanages. Everyone admired her. Everyone, except her own father. Across the city, Lucas Monroe was now 18. Tall, handsome, and dressed in designer suits. He carried himself like the future master of the Blackwood Empire. Every magazine called him the Crown Prince of Blackwood Group. The media loved photographing Ethan and Lucas together. The perfect father and son. A billion-dollar legacy. Blackwood's future CEO. Every article stabbed Vivian's heart. Not because Lucas was receiving love, but because Lily never had. One evening, Blackwood Mansion buzzed with excitement. It was Lucas's 18th birthday. The estate had been transformed into a luxurious venue. Crystal chandeliers sparkled beneath thousands of lights. A live orchestra performed in the grand ballroom. Politicians, business tycoons, celebrities. Everyone had been invited. Vivian stood quietly on the second-floor balcony, watching the guests arrive. Beside her stood Lily in a simple silver dress. Unlike the women downstairs dripping in diamonds, Lily wore only the pearl necklace Vivian had given her on her 10th birthday. "Mom." Lily smiled softly. "You don't have to come downstairs if you don't want to." Vivian looked at her daughter. "What about you?" Lily shrugged. "It's not my party." The words were spoken lightly, but Vivian heard the pain hidden beneath them. Downstairs, Ethan stepped onto the stage. The room fell silent. He raised his champagne glass. "Today, we celebrate my son." Thunderous applause erupted. Lucas smiled confidently. Ethan continued. 18 years ago, he gave my life new meaning. He will inherit everything I've built." Richard Blackwood, Ethan's father, nodded proudly from the front row. Margaret Blackwood wiped tears from her eyes. Sophie stood beside Lucas with a handkerchief pressed dramatically against her face. "My little boy has grown up." Guests applauded again. Not one person looked toward the staircase, where Ethan's actual wife and daughter stood in silence. Lily quietly turned away. "I'll be in my room." Vivian caught her wrist. "No." Lily looked confused. "Tonight. You don't hide. You've hidden long enough." Before Lily could respond, Nathan Cole approached them. He had been invited as Blackwood Group's newest board member. He smiled warmly. "Happy birthday, Princess." Lily laughed. "It's not my birthday." Nathan grinned. "I know. But someone should celebrate having you in this family." He handed her a small velvet box. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet engraved with tiny lilies. Lily's eyes widened. "It's beautiful." Nathan smiled. "You deserve beautiful things." From across the ballroom, Ethan noticed. For just a second, something uncomfortable stirred inside him. He quickly ignored it. After dinner, the host announced another surprise. "Mr. Ethan Blackwood has prepared a special inheritance ceremony." The guests gasped excitedly. Richard looked pleased. "This should be interesting." Samuel Reed, the company's CFO, frowned slightly. 18 is rather young. Richard smiled. "My grandson is exceptional." Lucas confidently walked onto the stage. Ethan placed a velvet folder in his hands. "I've decided to transfer 10% of my personal shares to Lucas." The ballroom exploded into applause. Reporters rushed forward. Camera flashes lit up the room. Lucas hugged Ethan. "Thank you, Dad. I won't disappoint you." Ethan smiled proudly. "I know." Vivian watched everything from the back of the hall. Her hands slowly clenched into fists. Those shares were meant to secure Lily's future. Years ago, Ethan had promised, "When we have children, I'll divide everything equally." Promises were clearly easier to make than keep. As the applause continued, Lily quietly slipped outside into the garden. The cool night air helped calm her racing thoughts. She sat alone beside the fountain. "You should have been inside." A familiar voice interrupted her thoughts. It was Olivia Bennett, now one of the city's most respected attorneys. Olivia sat beside her. "Your mother told me where I'd find you." Lily smiled politely. "I'm fine." Olivia looked toward the brightly lit mansion. "No, you're pretending to be." Lily stared at the water. "I don't understand. What did I do wrong?" Olivia's heart broke. "You did nothing wrong." Lily's voice cracked. "Then why doesn't Dad love me?" Olivia had argued countless cases in court. She had spoken before judges, politicians, and CEOs without fear. But this question, she couldn't answer. Instead, she simply wrapped Lily in a hug. Inside the mansion, another conversation unfolded. Samuel Reed quietly approached Ethan. "May I speak with you privately?" Ethan nodded. The two men entered the study. Samuel carefully closed the door. "I've reviewed several financial transfers over the past few years. So, large sums have been moved into accounts controlled by Miss Sophie Monroe." Ethan frowned. "I approved those." Samuel nodded slowly. "Some. But not all." He placed several documents on the desk. "There are signatures here that don't match yours." Ethan barely glanced at them. "Sophie's family has struggled financially. I told her to take whatever she needed." Samuel hesitated. "Sir, I think someone is taking advantage of your trust." Ethan leaned back in his chair. "Sophie would never do that." Samuel sighed inwardly. He had expected this answer. Before leaving, he quietly said, "I hope you're right." Meanwhile, Sophie stood alone in her bedroom. The warm smile she had worn all evening disappeared the moment she closed the door. She opened a hidden drawer inside her vanity. Neatly arranged inside were dozens of bank statements, property deeds, investment certificates, luxury jewelry receipts. Everything had been purchased using Blackwood money. Her phone buzzed. A message appeared. "Adrian Hayes. I'm returning to the country next month." Sophie's face instantly lost all color. Her hands began to shake. "No," she whispered. "Not now." She hadn't seen Adrian in 19 years. The man she'd once claimed to love. The man who was actually Lucas's biological father. She quickly deleted the message, then blocked the number. But the uneasy feeling remained. For the first time in years, Sophie was afraid. The next morning, Vivian was arranging flowers in the garden when Noah Brooks arrived. The former detective had recently retired from the police force. Nathan had recommended him months earlier. "You wanted to see me, Mrs. Blackwood?" Vivian nodded. She handed him a thick envelope. Inside were photographs, copies of bank statements, hospital records, old newspaper articles. "I want the truth." Noah looked through the documents. "What exactly am I investigating?" Vivian's eyes became cold. "Everything. I want to know where Sophie Monroe was before she returned, who Lucas's real father is, and every lie she's ever told." Noah slowly closed the folder. "This won't be easy." Vivian looked toward the mansion. Inside, Ethan laughed with Lucas over breakfast. Lily sat silently at the far end of the table, almost invisible. Vivian turned back to Noah. "I've waited 15 years. I can wait a little longer." Noah gave a slight nod. "Then I'll find the truth." As he walked away, Vivian closed her eyes. 4 years. She had endured humiliation, loneliness, heartbreak, not because she was weak, but because she believed the truth would eventually reveal itself. Now, she was done waiting. If the truth refused to come on its own, she would uncover it herself. Little did she know, the investigation she had just begun would expose a secret so devastating that it would destroy the Blackwood family from the inside. And when that day came, no amount of money, power, or regret would be enough to save Ethan Blackwood. 20 years after Sophie Monroe had walked into Blackwood Mansion with a little boy in her arms, the truth finally came home. 1 week before the shareholders' meeting, Ethan Blackwood was reviewing documents in his office when Samuel Reed knocked on the door. "Sir, I've received the final report." Ethan looked up. "What report?" Samuel placed a thick file on the desk. "It concerns the investigation Mrs. Blackwood commissioned." Ethan frowned. "Vivian hired an investigator?" Samuel nodded. "Former Detective Noah Brooks." Ethan's expression darkened. "What nonsense is she trying to prove now?" Samuel remained silent. He simply opened the file. Inside were photographs, bank transfers, old passports, travel records, hospital documents, and a faded photograph of a young Sophie Monroe standing beside a smiling man. The man's arm rested around her shoulders. They looked deeply in love. Ethan stared at the picture. "Who is he?" Samuel answered quietly. "Adrian Hayes. The man from Sophie's past." Noah Brooks entered the office. "I've confirmed everything." He placed another document in front of Ethan. "Sophie Monroe never disappeared 18 years ago. She left the country willingly. She lived with Adrian Hayes for almost 2 years. Ethan slowly stood. "No." Noah continued. "Neighbors believed they were husband and wife. Several witnesses confirmed Sophie was already pregnant before Adrian left for an overseas wildlife assignment." Ethan's face lost all color. "No. You're lying." Noah calmly replied. "I only deal in facts. The DNA test. There's one way to end all doubts." Noah slid a sealed envelope across the desk. "A court-approved DNA request." Ethan looked at Lucas, who had just entered the office. "Dad." Lucas smiled. "You wanted to see me?" For the first time in 18 years. Ethan looked at Lucas without certainty, without pride, without blind love. Only questions. Lucas frowned. "What's wrong?" Ethan forced a smile. "I just need a routine medical test." Lucas shrugged. "Sure." 3 days later, Dr. Daniel Foster walked into Ethan's office carrying the results. The room was completely silent. Present were Ethan Blackwood, Vivian Carter Blackwood, Richard Blackwood, Margaret Blackwood, Samuel Reed, Noah Brooks. Dr. Foster slowly opened the envelope. His voice was barely above a whisper. Probability of paternity. He paused. 0.00%. The report slipped from Ethan's hands. The room fell silent. Richard staggered backward into his chair. Margaret covered her mouth. Samuel closed his eyes. Vivian simply stood there, expressionless, because she had already known Sophie's last lie. Sophie was immediately brought into the room. She looked around nervously. "What is this?" Ethan threw the DNA report onto the table. "What is this?" Sophie glanced at the results. Her hands began shaking. "Ethan, I can explain," he roared. "Who is his father?" Sophie burst into tears. "I was scared. I thought Adrian would leave me. I needed security. I needed money. You loved me. I thought you'd never question it." Ethan stared at the woman he had sacrificed everything for. "You used me." She fell to her knees. "I loved you too. You loved my money." Ethan replied coldly. "Lucas learns the truth." Lucas stood frozen. His entire world collapsed in seconds. "What? I'm not your son?" Nobody answered. Lucas slowly turned toward Sophie. "Mom, you lied." Sophie reached for him. "I did it for us." Lucas stepped away. "You destroyed my life." Before anyone could stop him, Lucas ran out of the mansion. The shareholders' meeting. The next morning, every major news network covered Blackwood Group's annual shareholders' meeting. No one knew what was about to happen. Thousands watched the live stream. Ethan walked onto the stage. But this time, he looked 20 years older. His hands trembled. He looked toward Vivian. She nodded once. No hatred. No satisfaction. Only closure. Ethan faced the audience. "For 18 years, I believed a lie." Gasps spread through the hall. He continued. "I abandoned my wife. I ignored my daughter. I handed my company's future to someone who was never my son." The giant screen behind him lit up. DNA report. Financial records. Forgery evidence. Hospital documents. Sophie's confession. The room exploded. Shareholders shouted. Journalists rushed forward. Board members stared in disbelief. Richard Blackwood slowly stood. "In accordance with company bylaws, I move to remove Ethan Blackwood as CEO." The motion passed almost unanimously. Within minutes, Ethan lost control of the company he had spent his life building. Justice arrives. Police officers entered the ballroom. Officer James Carter approached Sophie. "Sophie Monroe, you're under arrest for fraud, forgery, identity deception, and financial crimes." She screamed. She begged. She cried for Ethan. He never looked at her again. As she was led away in handcuffs, the cameras captured the woman whose lies had destroyed one of the country's wealthiest families. Adrian Hayes. Several days later, Lucas met Adrian Hayes for the first time. Neither man spoke for a long while. Finally, Adrian said quietly, "I never knew you existed." Lucas looked away. "I don't know who I am anymore." Adrian placed a hand on his shoulder. "You don't have to become me. You don't have to become Ethan. Just become a better man." For the first time in years, Lucas cried. Not because he had lost an inheritance, but because he had finally found the truth. A father's greatest regret. Months passed. Blackwood Mansion became quiet. Too quiet. Vivian and Lily moved into a beautiful lakeside home that Vivian had purchased years earlier with the success of her own luxury interior design company. She had built it quietly, brick by brick. Without Ethan, Lily graduated at the top of her class. She later received a scholarship to one of the country's most prestigious universities. Nathan Cole, who had remained a loyal friend throughout the years, continued supporting both of them. Not out of pity, but out of genuine respect. Their lives finally became peaceful. Ethan, meanwhile, lived alone. Every morning, he passed Lily's old bedroom. The pink walls remained untouched. The shelves still held the stuffed animals she had loved as a child. On his desk sat something he could never throw away. A faded birthday card, written in crooked crayons. To the best daddy in the world. Inside, the drawing of a little family. Mother, father, daughter, holding hands. At the bottom, a single sentence. I love you, Daddy. Please come next year. The tears Ethan had held back for years finally fell. He realized something that no amount of money could ever change. Lily had waited. Not for gifts. Not for an inheritance. Not for luxury. She had simply waited for her father. And he never came. 5 years later, Lily stood on the stage of her university graduation ceremony as valedictorian. The auditorium erupted in applause. She adjusted the microphone and smiled. I owe everything I am to one person. She looked into the audience. Vivian smiled proudly. My mother taught me that your worth isn't decided by who chooses you. It's decided by how you choose yourself. The audience rose in a standing ovation. Outside the auditorium, an older Ethan watched the ceremony from a distance. He had not been invited. He did not try to go inside. He simply smiled through his tears. Because he finally understood. Some doors don't close because of fate. They close because of the choices we make. Vivian and Lily walked out of the university together. Lily slipped her hand into her mother's. Ready to go home? Vivian smiled. Always. Without looking back, the two women walked toward a bright future. Behind them stood Ethan Blackwood. Alone. Not because someone had taken his family away, but because he had chosen to abandon them, one decision at a time. His greatest punishment was never losing his company. It was living every remaining day knowing that he had traded the love of his wife and daughter for a lie. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more unforgettable rebirth and revenge stories. What would you have done if you were Vivian? Would you have exposed the truth immediately, or let Ethan live with his own choices until the truth destroyed him? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. And if you enjoy emotional stories filled with betrayal, karma, shocking twists, and powerful female leads who rise stronger after every setback, you're in the right place. Thank you so much for watching Reborn for Revenge. Stay safe, stay strong, and remember, sometimes, the greatest revenge isn't revenge at all, it's living a happier life without the people who never valued you. I'll see you in the next story.